What's up, guys? This is Bulvat the Fell-Handed, and welcome to the Art of the Type 59. We are on Scorpion Pass.
Which way we going?
We are on Team Destructions. The greens have spawned in the southeast side of the board. The reds have spawned on the northwest side of the board. Now, if you have not picked up this tank, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait for it next time. I was lucky enough to purchase it on the second run. I think the first run was earlier this year, maybe late last year. Either way, this tank is amazing. Makes good money. I mean, it's a solid tank. If you're used to running a lot of fast mediums or light tanks, this is going to be a big shock for you. It's going to be a big culture shock, really, because this thing is slow. I don't really want to say sluggish. It's adequately powered for Russian tanks. It's not fast, but it's not so slow it has trouble getting the speed. But then again, you don't get this tank for the speed. You get this tank for the fact that it does okay at everything. And honestly, that's the way you want your tanks. You don't want your tanks really strong in one area, because if they're strong in one area, they're going to be weak in many areas. So, and that's, I think, where the medium tank comes into play, is if you notice the really good medium tanks, like the Object 140, are just okay at everything. And that's what this tank is. The turret armor on this thing is ridiculous. 7 degrees of gun depression. If you get hull down, you're in business. Now, of course, the turret can be pinned. Both the commander's hatches obviously can be pinned quite easily, as well as to the left and right of the gun mantlet. However, you may need a little bit of a hotter round, i.e. a PCR heat, what have you, to go through that at that location. The whole armor of this tank is very surprising. You will bounce some rounds. You can side scrape. You can do things, that typically you can't really get away with in the higher tiers. Granted, you say, okay, well, I have my T62A, sure, I can side scrape. Okay, but, what if you have a Jagdpanzer that, has so much penetration and so much gun that he just overmatches your side armor? You're not going to get that in the lower tiers. The good thing about this tank, it does have preferential matchmaking. So you're only going to be +1. So the most you're going to see is 9s. And this tank can easily handle 9s. This tank is just, it's the total package. It really is. If you have a friend that has this tank, I highly recommend convincing him to let you use his account so you can just try this bad boy out. The gun, the aim time, the accuracy, it's mediocre, it's average. But that's perfect, because if that's average, then everything else is average, and it averages out. Like I said earlier, you don't want a really good anything, because you'll suffer for it. Now, moving on to the game here. As you can see in this tank, I try to side scrape everywhere possible. The penetration is low on the gun. It's 185. You put APCR, you have considerable penetration. The Type 59 pinning itself is problematic because it is an extremely tough tank. I personally would not recommend clutch shots on this tank unless you had no alternative. And when you are being, aimed at, your hull down, whatever, make slight micro movements. You don't really have to, go crazy and knock the gun off. But you just saw me right there a minute ago when the CDC was aiming at me. I just rocked back and forth. And that's kind of what you want. You want micro movements. The same thing when you're side scraping. Once you get your shot, make some micro movements. Just make sure not to over angle your hull, because you can pin this tank quite easily between the tracks and the side of the hull armor there, in between the little gap. So it's like anything else, it has weak spots. Once you learn the weak spots, you're going to be fine. You can control things a bit better. You'll have to excuse me, I have absolutely no skills on this tank, no sixth sense. which is my mantra of that's what you must have. So as a result of that, I also do not have repairs. So that's why I kind of run two toolkits. There was a game earlier that I burned to death. So, you know, you always want to make sure that you bring your auto repair kits. I'm a big advocate of running nothing but autos. At any rate, the penetration, the APCR on this gun is quite amazing. It gets the job done. You can pin the bigger stuff. And I typically run 2020. And the other, you know, you'll see me switch to AP, you know, if I know there's a light skin tank, or I know I'm going to get side shots or whatever. And you know, I just kind of do that. You know, at some point I may eventually just run nothing but APCR. But I'm not sure. I don't know. It seems to work for me, what it is. Now, as far as equipment on this tank, VB Addict states rammer, vertical stabilizer, and vents. This tank has 380 meter spotting range, so you know you're not really going to go crazy if you get the optics. You know, that's typically reserved for the 400 plus tanks. So right in here, you know, this is a perfect example of making excellent use of hold down, and somehow he sneaks around in and I get killed. It's going to happen to all of us. You know, but at the same time, you know, was there something I could have done better? Yeah, I could have maybe not pulled out quite as much, but at the same time, at his current elevation, he probably wasn't firing into my turret, but more likely into the deck of my engine, which, you know, as we know, the top part of all tanks is supremely weak. At any rate, guys, that's all I have for you today. 3,519 damage, 1,200 block, 1619 assist, 3 kills. Pretty good game for our 12th game, I think. Guys, please remember to like, subscribe, and share.
I'ma catch this motherfucker slipping, slipping, slipping.